Are you worried about your kid's mental health? Are you trying to figure out what really best interest of the child means? Well, this is the podcast for you. I'm Corey Shapiro. This is the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast, and we're going to talk about today protecting your child's mental health in a divorce. Let me tell you something. I do this podcast and I'm a divorce lawyer because of what happened to me as a child. I was a product of divorce. I had a lot of instability. I even went to 4 schools in 2 years during some pivotal time in my life. So I learned about instability. And as becoming a divorce attorney, as reading a lot, talking to other professionals, what I've learned is stability and happy childhood memories really make the childhood. So let's talk about what happens when you get into a divorce. Now, I want to share with you 4 levels that you and your family are going to experience if you're having a contested custody action to really bring this home. Now, if you can't resolve things and you're smart, you might consider using a professional. That could be something like a parenting coordinator, a mediator, a child development expert, someone that can help facilitate conversations between you and your spouse because you two can't agree. You have to remember, best interest of the child doesn't necessarily mean what's best for you. And it has to be child focused. So that could be really helpful looking at a professional who can look at it through your child's eyes. But let's say you can't resolve things in level 1. Well, then what happens? You got to move to level 2. You got to move to going to court, which is stressful and expensive and time consuming. And you may have to have the court appoint what's called an attorney for the child. Level 2 is not terrible because a lot of times the attorney for the child acts as a deal breaker. What I mean is, if you and your spouse have an attorney, how do you break that tie? How do you solve things? You can't, because you could say yes, they can say no, and you're stopped. So when you have an attorney for the child, they could side with one parent. And I would say generally, the court's going to side with the parent and the attorney for the child at least 75, 80% of the time. And the good thing about having an attorney for the child also is that you have to understand they're not doing anything other than advocating their client's position, which is the child. So if the child's very young, they'll probably substitute their judgment. But if the child's older and they think they're making sound judgments, childlike sound judgments, they're just going to advocate for them. Now, level 3, if you can't resolve your custody case, in level 1 or 2, then the court's going to appoint probably what's called a forensic. And that's a professional, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, who's going to examine your family, going to interview what they call collaterals, maybe the school, the doctors, whoever you want to give them information, going to look at a lot of documents, may psychologically test you, and they're going to render a report. And they may have recommendations, which the court is not bound by. It's just a recommendation. Who they think is the better parent in certain different categories. The 4th stage, if you can't resolve things with the forensic, and the forensic is very helpful, but sometimes people want what people want, and they're going to go all the way. And all the way is level 4. We're going to call that DEFCON 4 or the trial. And the problem with the trial is that at the end of the trial, that's when the judge interviews or has a conversation with your kid. Okay. So let's just think about that for a second. I'm going to put my lawyer hat on for a moment. I told you that we want stability and happy childhood memories. And this process, I don't believe, goes in that direction. The only level that I would really consider, and I hope you can solve things, your custody, is level 1. And the reason is because your kids are not necessarily involved, or they're involved in a very therapeutic way. But in level 2, attorney for the child, level 3, forensic evaluation, or level 4, trial, that's stressful. They're going to have an attorney. They're going to have to speak to a psychiatrist. They're going to have to speak to a judge. It is stressful. So let me just give you that food for thought. You may not be able to resolve it that way because of the other side, but just think that through. Really important. Now, let me give you some objections I've heard over the years. I'm a good enough parent. I'm a good enough parent. Why can't we do 50-50? And I just want to bring this home. It's not what is in the best interest of you as the parent. It's what is in the best interest of the child. And 50-50 may not be the best thing for the child, especially if they're young. I think that's what the research says. Maybe as they get older, you can do week on, week off. But it depends. It's fact specific. The second thing I hear a lot is, what happens if I'm the primary? I've always been the primary. They're not been interested. Now they want 50-50. What's the problem? Yeah, I think that's a sad move. And I think a lot of parents who get into custody situations who haven't been so involved still want 50-50. I think 15 minutes a day of being with your kids, let's say, or half an hour a day, every day, that might be all they can do if they work based on their schedule, but they see them every day. And they don't want now to only see them alternate weekends. It's a very different relationship. So maybe they do want 50-50. And that might be a problem for you. But it might not be bad for your kids. And then the third thing I see is parents who ask for 50-50, but it has nothing to do with the kids. It's only because a lot of states, and we're not there yet in thinking this through, the parenting time, the amount of parenting time you have is directly correlated to child support. So some parents seek more time to either receive child support or reduce the amount of child support they receive, and it has nothing to do with the kids. So maybe in child support 2.0 or child custody 2.0, they're going to think this through, and they should be very separate, very separate. All right, so what's my core message to you? Happy childhood memories, stability. That's what we want. And the whole system may go against that. So my tiny action step for you is, think about this. This is what sometimes I ask my clients. If you died, God forbid you died, who could take care of your kids? Could it be your spouse, your ex? They may not do it as well as you, but can they do it? And if the answer is yes, they can do it. They're a good enough parent. They're not going to be so emotionally engaged. They're not going to be so active as you will, but yes, they can do it. Then think this through carefully. Because maybe the whole system, this whole stress, the whole getting a little bit more time really negatively impacts your child. So this episode ends really our first series, which is Finding Your Footing of this season. And we're going to have what I'm going to call a checkpoint episode. When you read a chapter in a book and you end the book and they have like key points or questions, that's what we're going to do next episode as we get into our next series, which is Responding Without Escalating. We're moving to more strategy because we dealt with this series, the Finding Your Footing, with just our internal balance and getting that all set up correctly. All right, so join me for a great episode for this review. Checkpoint is going to come up next. I'm Corey Shapiro. Let's step forward with clarity together.
This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.